welcome to the Maria Liberati Show, where food meets art, travel, and life. This is Maria Liberati. What does food mean to you? Tell me in a recorded soundbite of 60 seconds or less, or a post of 50 words or less. Post it on social media, hashtag it The Maria Liberati Show, and if your soundbite or quotes are selected to be part of an upcoming segment, I'll send you an autographed copy of my book, The Basic Art of Italian Cooking, to you as a special thanks anywhere in the world, and welcome to my audience in the USA and everywhere around the world. We may not speak the same verbal language, but we can communicate by food. Food means language to me. But because we are now all food literate, it becomes more difficult to impress others with our culinary prowess. I love finding ways to make the not so ordinary out of the ordinary. The once chic French quiche and pesto and hummus, these are all things that were once considered gourmet, and now they've become somewhat ordinary. It used to be if you were in the US and you made a quiche, it was considered somewhat of a gourmet dish. But now we all speak the same food language, which is a great thing. On a recent experience, I had an invite to an informal cocktail party in the center of Rome, had me baffled as to what to bring. Maybe a hostess gift, a bottle of wine, a cake, or an appetizer tray. I just didn't want to be so ordinary. After all, this is the center of Rome where people make chic out of simple. Finally, it came to me. Make a quiche using rice for the crust instead of a pastry crust. But how to make rice compact and form into a crust was a bit of a dilemma. After a few experiments, I did it, and a rice-crusted quiche was born. Probably not for the first time. The finished quiche, placed on a pretty dish and wrapped in transparent cellophane, gathered in the center and tied with a ribbon, makes a perfect hostess gift. Bring a bottle of dry white wine for the perfect pairing, a dry Chianti or Verdicchio, or maybe even Est. Heat the quiche and chill the wine whenever you get to your destination before serving. And here's my recipe for a rice-crusted quiche. 1½ cups of rice, 1/4 pound of Emmenthal cheese, grated, 2 eggs separated, 3 tablespoons of olive oil that should be extra virgin olive oil, or you can substitute butter if you like, and you're going to need just a little bit more to coat the pie pan. 1/2 pound of leeks finely chopped or scallions finely chopped, 1/2 pound of ricotta cheese, 2 ounces of Swiss cheese grated Parmigiano Reggiano to taste, and salt and pepper a dash to taste. You're going to boil the rice for 15 minutes, or the length of time that it tells you to cook on the rice package. Drain the rice and rinse it under cold water. Place it in a bowl after it's been drained. Then you're going to place in the grated Emmenthal and the 2 egg whites. Blend and set this aside. You're going to coat the sides of a pie pan with either the butter or the olive oil, and cut a circle of parchment paper to cover the bottom and sides of the pan. Dampen it just a little bit, wring out all the excess moisture, and place it in the oiled or buttered pie pan to form the quiche. Make sure you place it around the pie pan tight so that it fits nicely. You're going to then brush the parchment paper with olive oil or the melted butter, whichever you choose to use, about a tablespoon of either. Then you're going to pat down the rice mixture onto the bottom and sides of the pan. Pat down firmly into place with the back of a spoon. Bake this in a preheated 400-degree oven for 10 to 15 minutes. Then you're going to lower the oven temperature to 375. Take out the quiche pan and leave the oven set at 375. Now on to the filling. So you're going to blend the egg yolks with the ricotta and grated Swiss cheese in a separate bowl. Set that aside. Saute the chopped leeks or scallions with the remaining 2 tablespoons of olive oil until the leeks or scallions are transparent. Lower the heat and saute for about another 5 minutes. Remove from heat and let them cool. Now, if you're using butter, butter does have a lower burning temperature, so be sure to watch that your leeks or scallions do not burn. Place the leeks or scallions into the egg and cheese mixture, and you're going to season to taste with salt, pepper, grated Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. Blend this well. You can blend it with a fork. Pour the mixture into your rice crust and bake it for 25 to 30 minutes at 375 degrees or until it's firm in the middle. Remove from the oven and let cool. When it's cooled, you can remove the quiche from the pie pan by picking up the parchment paper edges and place this on a serving plate and pull away the parchment paper. This dish is best served on the same day as it's made, but I've used this as great leftovers for lunch for the next day. And if you're going to heat it up before you serve it, because you want it to be a little warm. So reheat it in the oven before serving if it's gotten cooler, and reheat for about 5 to 10 minutes at 350 degrees. Be sure that you do not dry it out or burn the top. Really excited to have. She's so talented. A beautiful name also is Nadege Florimond. She was on Chopped. She has a book called Taste of Solitude. She has a successful catering company, a coaching company. Oh my gosh, where did you find the time?
I'm still wondering that myself, Maria. Thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome. I know people always tell me that too. So, and so I shouldn't say that because I'm that type of person also. But and I think that's great too, because I think you need to keep doing things and growing, right?
You have to. And then what I tell people, one trick, the way my mind wraps around everything I do, I consider everything a project, even though they're full-fledged businesses. But I think that's where a lot of the ways, like my methods, I just think of things as projects that need to be worked on as individual things, and I allow days, I allow certain time slots, and you just have to be more structured than you probably want to be.
Yes, yes, but I love it, and I love it when people get involved in so many different things, because everything is related, and you just kind of keep growing and growing out there. So I have to say I love that. I love your background. So can you give us some background? I know you have this method that you developed, which I think is so interesting. ROAR, the ROAR method. So can you tell us about that?
Well, thank you so much for asking that. As you talk about getting things done, I think the ROAR method is probably the answer to that question. ROAR stands for reach, organize, act, and realize. And I basically consider it my method for getting anything and everything done, from the micro to the macro level. Because when you break down everything into its parts, you realize it requires the same steps and the same system. You reach for it, meaning you think about it, you ensure that it's what you want, you set the goal, you set your why. So everything happens in that stage, from I want to lose 10 pounds to I want to start a multi-million dollar company. It all stems from the desire. So that's your reach. It all stems from why you want to achieve that goal. So I consider that reach part, time slot, your fine tuning to understand what is it that you want to do, why you want to do it, why it's important to you, why it connects to your passions, your purpose, everything. Then the O is the organize. That's the strategy stage, right? That's like, how am I going to get this done? Who do I need to meet? What lessons do I need to learn? What class do I need to take? What structures, what systems do I need to put in place in order to accomplish a goal? Like recently, I had a young woman working for me because I'm in real estate as well. And she was like, you know what? I want to actually be a realtor as well. So it was like, okay, now you know what your reach is. What is the organization? Well, I'm busy. I don't really have time. So for you to get your license, you have to create the time. So she had to create a system and a structure. When was she going to take her classes? Was she going to do it online? What is she going to do? And that's your stage to really structure yourself and make it happen. And then you get to your A, which is the act. I tell people this is the most important part of the system. They're all important, but I feel like a lot of people get stuck there. Because oftentimes in my coaching practice, I'll meet someone who's like, well, I'm a perfectionist. So that's the reason I don't start things, because I'm planning and I want to make sure everything is perfect so I can get it going. But I realize sometimes, not every time, but a lot of times that's fear speaking. And we use procrastination, we use perfectionism as a scapegoat not to act. And you have to act. It's in the acting that you're going to correct, anyways. I tell people all the time, in being an entrepreneur, I've learned over the years, the real magic happens in the doing, the real learning happens in the doing. So when you have to act, so you can adjust, you can see what's working, especially if you organize correctly. You'll make mistakes, you'll make less when you organize properly, but you still need to put into action to see, hey, was it a good idea to open a restaurant in this strip? Was it a good idea to walk on the street at this hour and do XYZ? So you need to do it so you can really adjust and get to your R, which is the realization, the accomplishment, the scaling if needs to be, what needs to be adjusted. All happens in that realize stage. When it happens, whether you're going to grow, whether you're going to do it all over again, whether you're just going to be like, oh, wow, I did it and I'm good. So that's really what the ROAR method is.
Wow, and that's really interesting. I love it that you organized, into that method, because business is so related to everything we do, as you know. And I think the one thing, you talked about many things with that, which are very important, but the one thing that kind of rang a bell with me is, I know even myself, but other people I hear, they're afraid to jump in because they think all the ducks have to be in a row. Everything has to be perfect or they can't start. And it's like, just like you said, you have to just start, right? You
Yes,
just start with baby steps. The one of the things that I always remember, when I was really young, I took swimming lessons, and I always hated, I would dip my toe in the water, and it's like, do I want to go in? Do I want to go in? And it was always like, you have to just jump in or you'll never get in the water. It's never the right temperature. If you don't jump in now, you're just never going to get in. And it's the same thing with business. And I think that, that little comment you made about exactly thinking that everything has to be just perfect or they can't do it, will never be perfect, right? You just have to make it perfect for yourself, I guess, correct?
Correct. And that swimming example is perfect, because what happens when you do get in, right? Your
Right.
body adjusts. You
Right.
adjust. You
Yep. That's
realize it's
another
not
good
so
point.
cold anymore, right? It's
Yes.
not so
Yes.
cold.
I didn't even think exactly. Exactly. So tell me, how did you, and I love that whole idea. I think it's organized so wonderfully. So how did you, what did it just like kind of hit you one day that, hey, how did you, I'm sure this came from your experience because you have an entrepreneurial background also. Do you remember like the day that you kind of just started? How did that you start thinking about this ROAR method?
It was funny because I've been running my catering company for about now 18 years, but at the time it was probably 8 years in. And I always get questions from other entrepreneurs, because I think people that I know, people I went to school with, they've always been intrigued by the fact that I've been able to live through my passions. They've been intrigued in the fact that I love food. I studied political science, and it was kind of like, how did you get into food? And I was like, well, I love cooking. It was purely accidental, in the sense that I never sought out to start a catering company, but they were intrigued by that and they wanted to know how can they start their businesses. So I initially started about thinking about coaching about 10 years ago. And I was like, well, how do I systemize what I do and how I do it? So I
Uh-huh.
actually I started thinking of my school mascot, because I went to Columbia University undergrad. I
Uh-huh.
studied political science, as I mentioned, because my initial thought was I was going to be a lawyer.
Uh-huh.
Being an immigrant child, you were supposed to be
Yeah.
either a doctor or a lawyer, so some
Yes.
kind of engineer.
Yes.
So I thought about the mascot, and I remember I was like, "Oh, our school mascot at Columbia is a lion," and I always loved the tenacity of a lion,
Oh,
you know.
yes, yes,
So I was
yes,
like, "Wow!" And what does a lion do? Roar. So it doesn't happen in one shot. It's just like these are
yes,
like micro little things that happen in your brain. So then I was
yes,
like, imagine if I could make the roar stand for something, and then
yes,
it just came, little by little, the pieces started working and it just made sense, and that's how it came out. So it was that combination of systemizing my work, and then also so I could package it using what was around me, which is my education, the
yes,
visuals, and all of that. But
yes.
let me mention this. I had this idea over 10 years ago. I
Uh-huh.
didn't formally start my coaching company until about 2 years later. So it takes time before
Yeah,
we could sometimes, even me who's seasoned, sometimes
yes,
even we all have that fear that I'm like, well, how
yes.
how can I teach someone else to do this? Do I even really know what I'm doing? So
Yes,
you always
yes,
ask yourself.
yes. I love that. Yes, you're saying all the things that I think the same. Yes, but you think about something and it's like, no, that's really, no, is that really, that's not going to do anything and nobody's going to
Mhm.
like it. Or, do I
Yeah.
have enough background here? Like you said, you had been thinking about it and working on it for 10 years and you were wondering if you had enough background in it. I think everybody, and it's the same thing. Go out there, jump in that cold water and let yourself adjust. And we're so glad that you finally decided to come out with that roar method. I think that sounds like a great way for people, especially that want to, have a successful business but need the coaching, to
Yeah.
organize that. I love it because it's such a strong, roar. It's such a strong word. It encompasses when you just hear that, you think of being strong and, successful and powerful. So it says it all. A lot of entrepreneurial experiences. Is there any that stick out in your mind of all your entrepreneurial experiences that you'd like to tell us about? Anything?
I think what's for me the most intriguing part I tell people is how things evolve. I always tell people to be an entrepreneur, you need to be innovative, but the other key important thing is you have to be malleable, to be flexible. Not flexible enough that you just bend to whatever, but flexible enough that you're able to adjust and flow it and still be able to head in the direction that you want. So I remember when I first started catering, I was very much corporate catering. I was very much corporate catering, and all my entrepreneur endeavors, like you mentioned earlier, everything connects for me, even though they may be different, but they connect. I started off catering very corporate in
Uh-huh.
2002 because my network was a very corporate, so I was doing like the Colbert Report, catering for Dr. Oz, catering for various companies here in New York. Then 2008 hit with the recession, and then I was like, wow, business dried up. What am I going to do? So many businesses were closing and shutting down. But then I was like, oh, the one thing I noticed with catering is people still get married no matter what's happening with the economy.
Yes. Yes.
People
Uh-huh.
still they may not have big budgets, but they still have
Yes.
decent budgets. And there are certain things they will not negotiate, which is their weddings,
Yes.
funeral repast, different things that still need life occasions still needed to be celebrated. So I
Yes.
started really gearing my company toward that. But then I never did those type of events.
Hmm.
So I started developing my own events as a way to showcase
Oh.
what I did on the catering side. Because I was like, I was never that advertiser in newspapers,
Hmm.
advertiser on Facebook. Ads weren't as popular. So it
Uh-huh.
was mainly like, how can I show people what a beautiful event I can give them? So I started hosting events and I started being known as that person who does these lavish galas,
Uh-huh.
lavish things so people could see themselves in it. So
Uh-huh.
I was really, I think I'm proud of that when I think about it in retrospect, because I was like, wow, I could have just laid there, played dead, and just be
Yeah.
like, wow, I have to get a job. And I thought about it almost
Yes.
every day in 2008 and 2009,
Yes.
you know? And,
Uh-huh.
but I was like, wow. And then the other component I developed around that time was cooking classes. I was like, I need to develop a low end system to food where it's not such a luxury item like catering, but everyone can participate. So I started running Groupons and started doing, cooking parties, as I call
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
Gather a group of friends in your own home. We would come in, or I would rent venues and invite people. Italian cooking classes, Thai cooking classes. So it was almost kind of like a cultural immersion. I've always loved the component of food, diversity, using food as a way to connect to people. So I
Yes.
use that same opportunity to do that and build community, or
Wow.
all at the same time increasing my clientele. And I
Exactly.
think and I think the second time it happened was just now, like COVID-19 hit,
Yes.
catering just stopped. It basically,
Yes.
I'm in the events business. Clients were canceling left and right, charging back credit cards
Oh,
because they
wow.
were afraid. And then I had to postpone so many of my events to 2021. So I was
Yes.
home. I used the quarantine time as a way, one, connect to food again. I turned on my phones, started cooking on my social media. I had no intention to write Taste of Solitude. I had no intention that I was going to write a cookbook, because my thought was my coaching business was really going well. And
Uh-huh.
that's what I wanted to develop more and focus more of my
Uh-huh.
attention on. I
Uh-huh.
was planning on writing a development book,
Oh.
called Lessons from My Father for
Uh-huh.
2020. But
Uh-huh.
COVID-19 kind of like shifted
Yeah.
that. And as I was cooking on Instagram, cooking on Facebook, it just made sense to develop these recipes into a book, but
Yes.
package it in the way I like to talk about food, which is, how do I talk about experiences and lessons and gratitude and hope and
Mhm.
all the thoughts and experiences that were happening around these times?
Yes.
Share those recipes, because food does offer comfort, but also kind of like still share my ideologies and my thoughts on life and experiences. And that's how Taste of Solitude came.
Came
So I think in
about.
entrepreneurship, what I'm most proud of is definitely the ability, not specific moments, but the
Uh-huh.
ability to always be able to shift, pivot. I
Yes.
don't even like to use the word pivot. I just like to say kind of like flow with what's going on.
Yes, and grow, you
And
grow. And
grow.
and I think that is such another wonderful point that you're bringing out, because I've seen that too. Too many people are so, they, just as you said, they think they can only do their business in one way, but the world is moving so fast. Eventually, it's going to change, and just as you said, so you have to be flexible enough to grow and just kind of shift, I guess, a little, just as you did, which I think is so wonderful. So you have that successful brand, and because well, if I can't do it this way, I'm going to do it this way. Now, with COVID, of course, we all had to shift. In fact, I'm doing the same thing. I was supposed to do a radio show, and the studios were closed down. So I'm like, you know what? Just starting it as a podcast, and any cooking classes I do, doing online also. But hey, that's a great way to do stuff too.
Yes.
And I love it that it gave you the time to do this wonderful book, which I love the concept, because I know you talk about, I love the title first, Taste of Solitude. I think we all need some of that in our lives now. And it's, you talk about cultures, how food brings cultures kind of together. And I've always loved exploring cultures through different food and languages. The language of food, I consider food a language too, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but I love the way that you talk about that with your book. So, is that how I know I was meaning to talk about this, and I guess we're calling it a culinary journal. Is that my producer called it a culinary journal, Toast of
Yes, that
Solitude?
yeah, no, that is actually the
Is that
subtitle.
correct?
It's like, yeah, that's the subtitle. It's Taste of
Wow.
Solitude, or Culinary Journal.
So I wanted to talk about it, and I know you've touched on it. So what do you, at the end of the day, so somebody gets your book, what do you hope that people take away from reading Taste of Solitude?
I think a couple of things. I think there's the element of that our food experiences are more similar than we think, because on the recipe side of it, for me, I consider it a fusion book. Fusion in the sense that I'm of Haitian heritage, and that is the foundation of how I cook. Even though my clientele is not necessarily Haitian all the time, most of the time it's not, but I do consider it what makes my catering business the way that I cook unique, because I bring that perspective to the kitchen. And I love travel. I love culture. So when I travel and I step into a place, whether it's local or internationally, I'm always looking at the space from a food inspired lens. I'm always looking at the way people communicate through food, whether it's street food, whether it's in the home, who cooks, how do they cook, why do they cook the things they cook. And like I say, I'm not a culinary historian in any sense of the word, but I am intrigued by it. So I think I'm always looking for it. So when I wanted to write Taste of Solitude, I wanted to bring some of those flavors of different foods, but still anchored in Haitian cuisine, because I'm always looking to educate the world a little bit more about Haitian food.
Uh-huh.
Because I think there's very few people who know about it. And I think it's such a phenomenal cuisine. It's such a phenomenal culture and history. So I use culinary as a way to educate the world about it in whatever way I can. So, but I wanted to share those flavors of Italy with the paella. I wanted to share the flavors of Jamaica with the escovitch snapper. I wanted to share the flavors of the, Puerto Rico with the plantain lasagna, just to show like, wow, there is similarity through the food. And then at the same time, focus it around comfort foods, because based on what we've experienced the last 5 months, we need comfort.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. So you have some fusion, like you did fusion. It sounds so interesting. The plantain lasagna, is that what you just said?
Yes.
Wow. So you did a lot of, and I love fusion when, as you know, you're mixing the cultures, and it's so interesting to do that, because a lot of different cultures have different tastes, different flavors that blend so well together. And I love that you took the time to do that and put recipes together. One thing I do have to ask you, because everybody loves that show Chopped. Now, we know you were on it. It's become such a powerhouse TV program. So can you tell us a little bit about anything about your experiences on the show?
Yeah, no, it was an amazing experience. I think Chopped came at a point, which was like over like 10 years ago now.
Wow.
But I think it came at a point in my culinary journey where I was still dazed. I don't own television. I didn't even know what Chopped was at the time. So when I got casted for it and they reached out to me, I said, sure, TV. But I don't even think I even understood myself what a great and big opportunity it was.
Right.
I always say I think I would have made more of it if it happens now. But at the time I was just like, okay, sure, thanks.
Yeah, we're too busy doing things to watch TV. I know people always ask me, did you see that show? And I'm like, what is it? They're like, how, you never saw that show? And it's like, I hardly ever have time to watch TV. So I hear you. Yes.
So I don't think I even did, but afterwards I saw the impact and realized just how many people watched it and still refer to it 10 years later and remember me. I have fans that are still following me on social media to this day because of that show. So I definitely say, wow, I'm glad I took advantage of the opportunity in that way. But part of me just hope that, wow, I was a little bit more prepared for it as well.
Yes. Well, that's
all
great.
This to say, I did not win, Maria. I did not win.
It was a great opportunity anyway to be on there. So whether you won or lost, I don't think we were even thinking of that. Just that you were on there, because it's become such a powerhouse of a show.
No,
I know so many, and by the way, I know a lot of other chefs that have been on there that are extremely successful, didn't win also. So I think it's just, that you were on there was a great experience. So I do want you to tell people where to find you. But before I do, I always ask all my guests, guest to answer this question for me. What does food mean to you?
Food for me is connection. Food is community. Food is joy. Food is the true soundtrack to our lives. I guess I'll call it the food track, but I say soundtrack because I think it's at every juncture, at every experience, good, bad, sad, happy. Food is there in some form. So yeah, so I would say it's those things, and connection and community probably are the biggest ones that stick out
Yes.
because I think it disarms. I think it allows for conversation. I think it allows for connection.
That's great. I love that answer. I think connection is a wonderful word to use with food. I love that. So Nadej Flurman, thank you so much for being here. And we've learned so much, actually, learned a lot. But can you tell everybody, please tell everybody where to find you and how to find you?
Thank you so much, Maria, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to
Yes.
you, speak to your wonderful audience. I am available on all social media platform as my name. I'm not that creative, so I only have my name. Not that I'm creative in food, but not in the
Well,
name.
your name is creative. I think it's a work of art too. It's so beautiful, as I told you. So you didn't really need to create anything else. But
So, so you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, even my website. It's nadejfleurimond.com. That's NADEGEFLEURIMOND as in David.com. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I pretty much live on Facebook and Instagram, so I'm always there. Send me a message. Let's connect. I would love to. I do cooking, shows sometimes on my lives via those platforms. So if you want to learn something new, interesting, I'm always there.
and don't forget Taste of Solitude. That's a new book, right? Is that your new book?
That is my new book. It just released July
Wow.
31st. That's
Wow.
available on my website as well, nadejfleurimond.com. If you're on any of my social media platforms, you'll see a link to it. But it's definitely a great book that connects food as well as the journaling of the last few months and the experiences that came around that and the lessons. So I hope someone who reads it, they're able to take the some of those lessons to get them through, whether it's a tough time or just everyday experiences, and offer them some perspective.
Yes, and I think that's great. That book is great. Also, as you mentioned, if you need something to get you through this whole period, and a lot of people are taking up cooking that haven't really had the time to do it. Now you have the time. So it's a great book to kind of take and get through this period of quarantining and all this other stuff that's going on. So it's a really nice book to do. And hey, if you do make any of the recipes in Taste of Solitude, share them on social media, hashtag it the Maria Liberati Show and Taste of Solitude, and we will
Yes.
both share it on our social media, I'm sure website, social media as well.
Yes,
Thank
that's perfect. We would love to
Yes, I
share
think that would be a
your
lot of
recipe.
fun. And Nadej Flurman, thank you so much and much success to you, girl. You're going loads of places, I'm sure, with all this stuff you have going on. I don't have to tell you that, but yeah.
No, thank you so much. Thank you for the work you do as well. I appreciate it, and the world needs it. So thank
Yeah.
you for connecting us to your amazing thoughts and recipes on Italian cuisine. Because again, every time I think of Italian cuisine, I definitely think of the similarities with Haitian food, especially a
Oh,
lot of the food that really that are grounded in the culture, at least as the world knows it,
yes.
started off as peasant foods, right? Started off as the foods that people, like I think of osobuco, like how people were like, well, this is the toughest part, the
Yes.
toughest part of the lamb. So
Yes.
now it's revered, but at
Yes.
the time it was a necessity, right? So I think of
Yes.
Haitian cuisine in the same way, where a lot of
Oh,
the foods that were once considered slave food or peasant food, only
yes.
poor people food, but now you package it a little bit differently, or you've traveled across different lands with it and it has a whole completely different meaning. I love that.
Thank you for also telling us that, because I am not, and I now you're making me want to. I'm going to have to study a little bit more about Haitian cuisine, but I love that because I know there are a lot of cultures that have this similarity, as you said, with Italian cooking being related first to that peasant kitchen. Those recipes that they developed are now served in some of the most expensive restaurants because, as you said, they're packaged differently. So people are like, oh my gosh, that it's some wonderful or very unique recipe. And here it was developed by the peasants, right? Because
Yes.
they, really, I mean, they had to just try to make do with whatever ingredients they had. And they became so creative because out of necessity. So I love that. I was not aware of that about Haitian cooking. So I will definitely look into that. But yes, I love the similarities also. That's wonderful.
Definitely, like I said, and the food tastes great. So I love
Yes.
both Italian cuisine and Haitian food. We can say the same. They taste
Yes.
amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you again. And thanks again. And I'm sure we'll have you back at another time on your next book or your next project.
Thank you so much, Maria. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too, Nadej. Thank you. Thanks for joining and listening to the Maria Liberati Show. If you have any recipes that were inspired by today's episode, like my rice-crusted quiche, or any recipes from my blog at marialiberati.com, or my new YouTube channel, the Maria Liberati Channel, or our special guest today's book, A Taste of Solitude by Nadege Florimond, take a picture. Show us. We'd love to see any of your homemade favorite dishes. And hashtag the Maria Liberati Show posted on social media. We'll be gathering pictures and posting on my website and social media in the next few weeks. Thanks to my producer, Britton Roselle, and this week's guest, Nadege Florimond. Go to my website, marialiberati.com, to keep up with my blog and the show and my book series and the basic art of Italian cooking. Go to Twitter, that's Maria Liberati with a capital M. You can find me on Facebook at Chef Maria Liberati and Maria Liberati. You can also find me on Instagram at Maria Liberati and Chef_Maria Liberati. And don't forget to post your answer to the question, what does food mean to you, in a recorded soundbite of no longer than 60 seconds, or a social media post of 50 words or less. Hashtag it the Maria Liberati Show. Post on social media or email it to me at maria@marialiberati.com. If your answers are selected for an upcoming podcast segment, you'll receive an autographed copy of my book, The Basic Art of Italian Cooking. And we'll send it to you no matter where you live in the world. So anywhere in the world. Until next time, peace, love, and pasta.